Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and today I want to pick up on a little something that I talked about in a short, that being Starbase Yorktown from Star Trek Beyond. In the short, I talk about how great of an idea the Yorktown station is, how it embodies the true spirit of the Federation and is a rare look into the actual utopian ideals of the Federation in the JJ films, which frequently sidelines that utopian image. However, what I also mentioned in that short was that there was already a design pre-existing Starbase Yorktown that kinda did the same thing all the way back in the 60s, and that being the Starfleet Headquarters designed by Franz Joseph. So this is in the Starfleet Technical Manual of the 1960s, written by Franz Joseph himself. So obviously a lot of things in here have been retconned over the years, and this was very much him sort of filling in the blanks. Not all these things necessarily fit into later lore. However, I still feel that Starfleet Headquarters is worth looking at, and it's worth exploring because of how it can actually fit into the lore, and also critically how it creates an overall image of the era. It also serves as an excellent jumping off point to talk about stations generally. It's a good comparison to the later Earth Spacedock, which I have some major problems with. And it's also a pretty good example of early Federation design. While it is cast as a TOS era station, we'll see going through the design that it probably actually predates the original series era by at least a few decades, given how the nature of design and infrastructure and capacity works. So without any further ado, let's go into it. So, as I say, this is a Franz Joseph design from the 1960s, and right out the gate there's something that you need to understand, and that is that in original series Star Trek, Franz Joseph treated it with a lot more hard sci-fi sensibilities than later Trek. And so this means that while the Enterprise might have artificial gravity, this station does not. This station operates on the principles of spin gravity. Thus, in space, it is, relatively speaking, vertically oriented. It's basically standing on its side and spinning, creating that centrifugal force. And its design language is basically the rule of 6. So, Deep Space Nine is very much built on the rule of 3. We have 6 docking spheres and then 6 internal habitats. This station overall is 2.5 kilometers across. Critically, as far as Franz Joseph was concerned, this station was not only to serve as the headquarters of Starfleet, but as the capital of the Federation. You'll recall that in Star Trek Beyond they mentioned that showing geographical favoritism to certain areas of a planet might cause unnecessary tension among Federation members, and the idea of creating a truly neutral capital is an excellent way of getting around that. That's exactly what Starbase Yorktown was intended to do, and it is exactly what Starfleet Headquarters here is meant to do. It's to provide a completely neutral ground where everyone can meet. So this station was not only to serve as the capital of the Federation and Starfleet Headquarters, but it also features a vast array of other facilities, including the Federation Park, museums, lagoons, housing residences, farm facilities, orchards, mountains, wilderness, sports facilities, Starfleet Academy, amusement centres, apartments, offices, and a city complex. Suffice it to say that this station was jam-packed with facilities and features. This was no small undertaking. This is quite a statement of Federation design prowess. So overall, this is a very interesting, hard sci-fi design. However, it features some issues. It's worth saying that there are a couple problems with the design as envisaged by Franz Joseph. It's excellent and it's visionary. However, there are some things that he didn't take into consideration, which we as fans in now know that he, in the 1960s, when he designed this, did not know. First and foremost, you have the problem of the vertical internal orientation. As I mentioned, this has spin gravity, which means the walls are effectively the floor. Effectively, the problem with this is that you do not have much in the way of floor space. In fact, you have very little floor space. If we look at each environmental habitat, you can see how they are actually designed in, I suppose, a teardrop shape, and that actually the floor, the ground, forms actually the minority of that volume or area. It's not even at the widest point of the teardrop, it's actually towards the narrowest point of the teardrop, which means that you have an awful lot more airspace than you have floor space. So you're wasting a lot of volume as just empty air. Now, there's some benefits to this, particularly if you're running this as a hard sci-fi colony. However, as we say, Star Trek is not necessarily that hard sci-fi, and given that the Enterprise and every other Starfleet ship has gravity plating, it seems unreasonable to expect this to just have non-artificial gravity. There's also other problems with this design. The spin gravity would work, but it would be on a scale that is too small. In order to make spin gravity work, you need things to be big, really big. And this potentially could generate spin gravity if it was spinning fast enough, but it would also create vertigo in its inhabitants. So the inhabitants would be able to look up at the ceiling, and given the distance of the ceiling, they would realize that, you'd create vertigo in people. It isn't large enough that it can afford to have spin gravity, effectively. And as I say, artificial gravity, we now know, is a thing as a concrete part of the Star Trek universe. So, how would I go about improving or amending this design? Because I really do like it. Firstly, the very simple thing is to flip the internal orientation horizontally. There's no reason to have this spin gravity when you can just have artificial gravity, and it would massively simplify things. This would give us a floor area of 380,000 square meters per section. That would give you a combined floor area of 2,280,000 square meters. That's a lot of space. That's a huge amount of space. And given how much they were able to pack into the original design, you'd be able to fit in even more without losing all that much in terms of airspace or other facilities. You've got more than enough space to fit all the housing that we previously mentioned, and you'd be able to do it at far greater scale. And that's not even including the central core of the station or the outer docking rings. So this would have an enormous amounts of space. We'd be looking at a population here probably in the range of tens of thousands. It's widely accepted that Star Trek often underestimates the populations of ships and stations. This is going to be a truly vast station, and given that this is meant to serve as a form of capital for the Federation, even though de facto it would of course become Earth, it has to then have all the facilities and capacities of a capital. Just to draw a brief historical comparison, a lot of countries throughout history, particularly those with unpopular regimes, shall we say, have always sought to build themselves new capitals, generally away from the masses who threaten to overthrow them. But it's always incredible to look at how massive these new capitals they build are, and often how empty they can end up being. Bit of a danger there. But it's also critical to note that because this is the Federation capital, it would be built in a position that is equidistant between all the founding worlds, thus placing it about 5 parsecs from Earth. This means that it is existing in deep space, which therefore means that this station has to be completely self-sustaining. And while Joseph acknowledges that with having orchards and farmland and everything, I think he considerably underestimated the sheer scale the station would have to have internally, the sheer amount of space the station would need in order to support a population of not just the central headquarters of Starfleet, but also the capital of the Federation. Moving outward, we'll now take a look at the docking spheres. This is a very interesting design aspect. There are 6 of these, and each sphere is able to contain 1 starship and 2 starcruisers. Granted, it is a considerable squeeze, and you're certainly not going to be getting them out in a hurry. but these spheres are compartmentalised, and this means that you can actually realistically pressurize these spheres and allow people to freely float and operate while carrying out maintenance on the ships without worrying about having to constantly depressurize and repressurize the bay as ships come and go. So in total, we are looking at a capacity of 18 vessels. The only disadvantage of this design is that in each pod, of the 3 vessels that can be docked there, only one ship can exit at a time. Of course, if we switch it to a horizontal orientation rather than the vertical orientation, you only have one point of entry and egress. And that would mean that the starships have to reverse out. Not that difficult, but an added layer of complication. And that would mean that you lose the ability for ships to effectively drive in and drive out, which is what the vertical orientation does allow you. Of course, you could just have it so that it still retains those those mirrored hatches, but then of course ships are then moving vertical relative to the horizontal of the station, which would look unusual, but completely reasonable. So, why do I like this design so much? Why does this work for me? So, it is positioned outside of the solar system. It is truly neutral ground. And it's worth remembering that the Federation is composed of species, particularly in its early history. It is composed of species that up until very recently really didn't like each other. And only the threat of being conquered piecemeal by the Romulans forced them to put their differences aside and start cooperating. So it creates neutral ground for states that are not necessarily on the best of terms with one another. It also creates a good centre for infrastructure and trade, and it can serve as a jumping off point for the frontier. So not only does it serve as a good point of trade between the various core worlds, but it also serves as a good way station for those going beyond the core worlds out to the now expanding frontiers of the Federation. It is fundamentally the embodiment of Federation utopian ideals. Yes, this station has military applications, of course it does. However, critically, it is, in its intent, a monument to peace and cooperation, and it can demonstrate very effectively that Starfleet is not just a Homo sapiens only club. With a properly designed habitat dome, you can not only have residences and orchards and farms and wilderness areas, but you could also have skies for avian species and also underwater habitats for aquatic species. This station was designed with that kind of future-proofing in mind. You never know who is going to be joining the Federation in the future, and so by creating a truly holistic biosphere, by designing a truly complete and holistic biosphere and station, you're able to accommodate all kinds of species that may in the future be joining the Federation. And again, that's a very good way of introducing species to the Federation and showing them that all are welcome, all are included. So, I've made my case for why I think that this is an excellent design of station and more than satisfies the design brief of Starbase Yorktown, arguably in a way that is slightly less extreme than the Starbase Yorktown of Star Trek Beyond, and frankly, better than Earth Spacedock. But I've also now got to explain, well, why don't we see it? I've somewhat created a rod for my own back here. So, when do I see this being constructed critically? So, I would estimate that this project probably began basically immediately after the formation of the Federation, so in the 2160s. Given that, at this particular point, various members of the Federation are only just coming to trust one another, and the idea of a truly neutral meeting point and capital seems like an excellent idea. You know, they're very souped up on that idealism rather than practicalities. Now, while Earth eventually became de facto capital of the Federation, in the early years of the Federation, this was widely accepted as the administrative center, but gradually, particularly as infrastructure, trade links, trade routes improved, and as the infrastructure around Earth improved, bearing in mind, up until Earth Spacedock, there wasn't really anything in the Sol system that could really serve as an effective piece of infrastructure to support large delegations and large formations of ships coming and going in the way that a capital needs to. And that's why Starfleet Headquarters was regarded very much as necessary. It was very much something that everyone could agree on and wasn't really going to upset anyone in its design, albeit it would eventually become irrelevant as things improved and developed in the various core systems, and the need for such a way station became less and less. So it probably took about 25 to 30 years to build, which would mean that it was completed in 2190, and then its primary service would extend up until 2270, 2280, depending on when you think Earth Spacedock was built. So once Starfleet moved to San Francisco as its primary headquarters with Earth Spacedock, it really just became a civilian trading port and trading post, and just kind of became a cultural site more than anything else. It's still out there in the 24th century, but its relevance to overall interstellar affairs is drastically diminished. It's more a relic of the early Federation, which simultaneously embodies the idealism and the ambitions of the period, while also demonstrating some of the key limitations that they faced in that time, and perhaps a little bit of their arrogance as well. So, to wrap things up, Franz Joseph Starfleet Headquarters just is Yorktown, but better. I mean, let's just accept that right out the gate. It is a symbol of the ideals and the idealism, perhaps naive, perhaps reckless, perhaps arrogant idealism of the Federation, but it certainly demonstrates that. And for a time, it would have been an absolutely flourishing and vibrant colony, but that was unfortunately left behind by the inexorable march of progress and technology until it became a quaint backwater. What it does, however, tell us is not only how Starfleet operated and existed in this new Federation, but it also tells us an awful lot about the average people of the Federation. It tells us who they were, how they lived, and how they lived critically alongside each other in this new Federation. So with that, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you to my members, my Navarks, Jeffrey Ballard, Tully DT, Rella, and Macross Schaffer. My commanders, Philip Ty, Birdmonster, Jeff Hallam, Mark Philippe, Robert Sampson, Sean Farrell, Narata, Nathaniel Mead, Gabe Logan, DM Tribal Typhoon, Nicholas Walsh, Martin McConville, JC Tech Wizard, Rizel 3D, James C, Alcara Dreamer, Joe G, Turd Ferguson, and You Don't Know Trek. And I salute my Centurions, Pendlebury, Marcus Hall, Julian Arnott, Freedom Trooper, Okokatum Questo, Squadra Course, John Nicole, Athys Collection, Greg Martin, Shermos, Marzarine, and Bird of Play D3. And I thank all my loyal sub-lieutenants. Thank you guys for supporting the channel, and I will see you all in the next video.